Hi there, it's Mark Wickersham here, and I want to share with you some of the new exciting developments in Cloud Pricing 2.0. So let me take you through and show you the first thing that's changed, which is a way of getting your new template into the menu bar fast. So let's imagine that you import a new template. I'm going to go with this one on the screen right here. So here's the template. I can now make my changes. I can edit the template in any way that I want. And you'll notice on the screen here, if you go right to the top, you'll see there's a button here. It's red and it says next to it, template off. And you can click on the icon to read that. What this means is that it's a draft template. It's not yet been put in the left-hand menu bar over here because it's draft. And so we can now make our changes to our draft template. Once you have then made whatever changes you want to make, you simply switch it from template off and it will automatically move it across to the menu bar for you. Now, before I do that, let me just show you one more thing first. One thing you will want to do is change the name of the template, because if you import a template, you will find that it might have it'll have the date that you've imported it. So you'll perhaps want to rename that, because if you don't, this is the name that will appear in the customer-facing left-hand menu bar. So I just simply hit the pencil icon to the left, and let's say we want to call this simply personal tax returns. So I'll just save that, and now I can select the bar here at the top, the template off, change that to on. Now you will need to refresh your browser. So I'm just going to go up into, I'm using Safari, let me just refresh that, and you will now see over in the left, we now have at the bottom here the template for personal tax returns, so we can start pricing straight away. So template on, template off at the top is a quick way to get your template into the menu bar and start using it straight away. Whereas before, you would have had to have gone into the module manager, changed it there, assigned the template to your module, and then go into the menu manager to put it into the menu. Next thing you'll see is to the right of it, we have this drop-down box labeled options. What we've done is we've tidied up the screen a little bit to collect various previous buttons into one place, but also you have at the bottom now, you can go to the module manager direct if you want to, rather than have to go back to global settings and then dive into it. So here we are in the module manager, and if you want to, you can now reassign a different icon or upload your own image to appear in the left-hand customer-facing menu. The third change we've made is a faster way to edit your prices. I'm in my module here for personal tax returns. Let's imagine that I set this up some time ago, but now I want to review my prices perhaps. I want to perhaps put some of the prices up. And so normally what you would do is go into each question in turn and hit the edit button to make the changes that you want to make, change the price, the amount, the type of question it is. But what we can now do to save ourselves time, I can make my change. I might change this from a drop down to a yes/no question, and I want to make this, if it's yes, it's 500, and if it's no, it's 400, for example. And then having done that, normally you'd save and close, and then you would go on to the next question. But now we have save and next, and this is a fast way to go between the questions. You can work through each question sequentially and change the values or whatever else you want to change, or simply just to go through and remind yourself what you put in for each of the questions, how you set them all up. Just this save and next moves us sequentially through all the questions. And also, if over to the left, you'll see we also have a save and previous, so you can go backwards as well. Each time it saves your changes and moves to the previous or the next question, as well as, of course, save and close, which it brings you back to here. So that's the third change. It's a fast way of getting between your questions and changing them. Let's now talk about a big one. This is a huge change, and this will open up so many possibilities for you. You'll know that you can create different sections of questions. And one of the most common questions we get is, I'd like to combine different services into one module. It might be, for example, you want to price payroll services within your bookkeeping module. Now that can be done. The trouble that we have is we can, because of the way that by default the calculations work, you will find that the order of the multiplications make a big difference. In other words, you could create a model that does a whole series of calculations for perhaps pricing, bookkeeping, and then you create a section for payroll, and you might have a question, do you want payroll, yes or no? And you have a few questions that add on a value, a price for the payroll. And then you might have a question that says, do you want this yes or no as part of your payroll service? And it might be a multiplication. It might multiply the price by 1.5. And what happens by default is that multiplication will apply to the total price up until that point in time, not the price of the bit within the payroll section. And so you can get some unexpected results. Now, of course, the way that you would get around that, if you were building a formula in Excel, for example, is you would insert brackets in a different place. So you would effectively isolate a section of formula. In this case, it might be the payroll. We isolate the payroll and do a calculation there. And so when we have a question within our payroll section that multiplies by 1.5, it only multiplies the price of the payroll bit that's been calculated so far by 1.5, and then it adds on whatever the end result of that section is, the payroll, it adds that on to the previous section, which would be, in this case, your bookkeeping price. So effectively what we're doing is we're isolating sections. So let me show you how you do that now in the software. So here I am, I'm inside, again, my personal tax returns here, and let's imagine that I have two sections in this case, and what I want to do is, if, for example, this last question multiplied by, let's say, 1.5, but I only wanted to multiply the previous bit, the previous question, by 1.5, and not the entirety, I'd want to isolate the About the Service You Want section. How do we do that? Really simple. We hit the pencil icon, that's the edit button, and what you'll now find whenever you go into a section, there is a bit that says isolate section in formula. So I will tick that, hit the save button, and what you'll see is the section name now has brackets around it and the blue text to say this section is isolated, and that's telling you, and of course telling the calculations, to do the calculations for those questions in isolation, and then once it's worked out that number, add that on to the previous section. This opens up so many possibilities for you. It'll save you a huge amount of time if you want to start creating more complex formulas, if you want to control what gets multiplied, or of course percentage increase, percentage decrease, if you prefer to work in percentages. Okay, that's the big change we've made. There's an even bigger change we've made, which I know this will get you really excited, because this will make it so much easier to test your models. You see, the old way of doing things is you'd build your model, having then edited the questions, you would then go and click on the model on the client-facing left-hand menu bar to go and do a quote, and you would then test the prices. And if the numbers came out okay, that was fine. But if not, you'd want to go back into the template, make the changes, edit the changes. Having then saved those changes, you'd go back to the left-hand client-facing menu bar, select that particular service and do a quote all over again. And each time you needed to make a change, you'd be going backwards and forwards between the client-facing front end to test the math, to do a quote, and back into the template section to edit and change your template. And then, of course, what would happen when you do that and you're not sure why the answer's coming out the way it was? Well, the way that you would get around that is you would produce an internal report. The internal report that sets out, firstly, how you've answered the questions in the quote, and also an internal report in the template editor section where you can produce a list of all of the questions and the calculations. And with those two reports side by side, you could work through manually to see how the numbers are building up. And then you would spot problems like sometimes you might multiply a number by 0, which brings everything back to 0 again. All that has changed. This is going to make your life so much easier when it comes to testing and changing your model. You will not need to go and do test quotes anymore. Let me show you in the software exactly what I mean. So here we are again inside our editor for the template. And you will see the usual where you edit the questions, the formula builder, expressing the price and so on. But there's now one new tab. It's called Preview. Preview is where you now can test your models fast. So let's click on that for personal tax returns. What you see on this screen is something very similar to the client-facing screen, what the client would see when you do a quote. So what we can now do is create a quote for a client. Obviously we're testing, this isn't the client-facing, this is for testing. I've started answering some of the questions. However, before I finish the next question, you'll notice over in the top right, we have a calculate button, but it's grayed out. It's grayed out because we can't calculate a price yet until we've finished off answering the questions. So we have another question here. Let me just answer this particular question. It's now turned green. We've now answered the questions because all the other questions were set to a default answer. So having now answered the questions, we can hit the calculate button. And this will show us how the price is building up. So because I answered yes to the first question, who is the tax return for? It's $500. That's what I put in my over in the questions. And we can double check that. We can go back into questions, click on the edit button for the first question. It's set as a yes/no question with a yes answer being 500. So that's where the 500 comes from. So on the right-hand side, it says price running total. We can work through and see how the price is building up. And so if you get any unexpected results, it's likely to be, it could be a mistake that you've made in the formula. And so you can go back very quickly to the questions and go and make the changes and then go through and have another little look at this. You'll see as you work to the bottom, we then have, you can see exactly how it's calculated, what the payments will be, what it will show to the client. And at any point in time, you can make changes here. So if you want to, if we change this one to a no answer, we can hit the calculate button. Again, it'll recalculate the price. We've now got a starting point of 400. So hopefully you can see why I'm so excited by this, because it's going to save you a ton of time with testing your prices. Rather than going backwards and forwards and doing quotes, test quotes, we can stay within the editing part of the template editor and do test quotes very quickly, and we can move backwards and forwards between the questions tab and the preview tab to make changes and fine-tune until we are happy that it's coming up with sensible prices. Now there is a word of warning though, unfortunately this is not available to everybody. This functionality doesn't work if you've been playing around with the formula builder, which is something that we don't recommend anyway. It's for advanced users. So my advice is always don't use the formula builder. Instead, allow Cloud Pricing to do the calculations in the order you create the questions. It's much simpler. Don't use the formula builder. But if you have used the formula builder, because you've changed the default formulae, then this section won't work. And you'll be able to see that straight away because it will just be a column of zeros. Now, if that is the case for you, if you've got a column of zeros and you would love to have this functionality back on again, there is a way to get around it. You'd need to go back into Formula Builder and reset to the default calculation. But of course, what that will do is that will change whatever manual changes you've made to the Formula Builder. Now, of course, this probably isn't a big issue if that's the case, because anybody that uses the Formula Builder is probably an advanced user, understands how the calculations worked, and probably happy with the model. And so it's perhaps not an issue. But my advice is, if you want to keep life simple, do not use the Formula Builder. Use the default calculations that does the math in the order you do the questions. You can now isolate sections anyway, which allows you to put the brackets in the right place if you want to multiply just certain sections. And then, of course, as long as you don't use the Formula Builder, you've got access to this functionality. We have a couple of other changes as well that were based on popular requests. The first of those, if we go into expressing the price, and if I move down to the section for other options, where you can, for example, hide decimal places, that's the default and the recommendation. You can show your sales tax and the rate of sales tax. But also we have sections labeled hide unselected rewards and hide unselected options. What they do, and this was based on a user request, is when you use Proposal Builder to create proposals, you can add an appendix or page that pulls in the table that shows all of the behaviour awards and another table for all of the optional extras. And they would show every behaviour award and every optional extra regardless of whether they were selected or not by the client. And someone said to us, it would be great if we could specify and just show in the fixed price agreement, in the proposal, those things that were specifically selected by the client when we did the price. So now you can do that. You can see here we have two simple buttons here, lozenge buttons, where you can choose to hide those amounts, those line items that weren't selected. And the last change relates to client copies. You'll know that you can purchase copies of the software for your clients and create pricing models for your clients. I have a few set up here. For example, I have one for a bike mechanic. And if I log into that, you can see one that I've set up for a bike mechanic shop. Because this is a client copy, you are logged in with a separate set of login details. And before, if you wanted to go back to your version of cloud pricing, you had to log out and log back in. But now you can see there's a new menu icon at the top labeled Back to Admin. Back to Admin automatically logs you out and back in and takes you back into your version of cloud pricing. So you can switch now much faster between client copies that you've set up for your clients and your version of the software. I'm really excited by those changes. There's some big things in this new version of cloud pricing, enabling you to isolate the sections in your calculations. The ability to preview the calculations as part of the testing process to save you going backwards and forwards. The fact that you can now import a new template or create a template and it's set to draft, but when you then make it live, it will automatically attach it to a module and automatically put it in the left-hand client-facing menu bar, and many, many other changes. So have fun with that, and as ever, please let us know what feedback you have. Please reach out if you've got any suggestions for further improvements. Bye for now.